Hello again. One of the things which I've noticed over the years is that the more the authorities limit and restrict the right of ordinary people to own firearms, whether they're shotguns, target pistols, or any other kind of weapon, so too has the number of dangerous criminals using such weapons on the streets of our cities increased. The two things seem to go hand in hand. And the only civilians these days with guns are the ones who are dangerous and mad. I cannot help but feel there is something wrong about that. Well within living memory, until 1968 in fact, anybody could walk into a gun shop in Britain and buy a shotgun and ammunition without needing any kind of identification, let alone a firearms certificate. At this same time, there were many pistol clubs, and some schools had arsenals in them for their combined cadet forces. There were state schools in London with rifle ranges and armouries containing not only rifles and ammunition, but even submachine guns, specifically Sten guns. These were the most peaceful and law-abiding days ever in Britain. If at any time a gun were to be used in the streets by criminals, it was front-page news for days. Slowly but surely, restrictions were placed on the private ownership of guns. In 1968, the law was changed so that one needed a firearms certificate to buy a shotgun. After a few massacres like Hungerford and Dunblane, it was made illegal for people to own pistols for target shooting. Gradually, it became all but impossible for any ordinary law-abiding citizen to own a firearm. During that same period, more and more guns began to be used on the streets, mainly by young gangsters. The more that ordinary folk were prevented from having access to guns, the easier it seemed to get for criminals to get hold of the things. This seems somehow wrong. Hardly a day passes without some shooting on the streets of Britain's cities. The only people who do not have guns are the very ones who would be safest with them. I cannot help but think that if more law-abiding folk were armed, then some of the rougher elements might think twice before getting up to a few of the tricks which they currently do. I think that it would have a wholesome effect upon some young hoodlums, perhaps if they were never sure that the next normal person that they molested might not have a pistol concealed about his person. There are very law-abiding countries where almost everybody owns a gun. Switzerland, for instance. The murder by shooting there is all but unheard of. I know that there are disadvantages in the private ownership of firearms. We see incidents in the United States that we would perhaps not wish to see here, things like school shootings, for example. Ideally, I would prefer that nobody had a gun at all in Britain, other than the army and police. But as criminals seem to have no difficulty getting hold of guns and few inhibitions about using them, it does seem to me that the odds are currently stacked very much against us. Perhaps it's time to even things up a little.